If you've been following my channel for a while, then you will probably be familiar with this diagram, the astrochromogram, which I have used as a tool for mapping out the various relationships between psychological, alchemical, mythical, and astrological archetypes. The moon represents femininity, blood, the mother-child relationship, familial bonds, nocturnal rumination, and one's connection to the past. The sun, conversely, represents the higher ideals which guide the human psyche forward through the process of individuation. The lunar archetype represents the self as an inextricably interconnected, relational entity, while the solar archetype represents the self as a unique individuality which exists independently of such interrelations. As we can see here, the moon is adjacent to Mercury, indicating an affinity between the lunar personality and mercurial tendencies, such as thoughtfulness, ideation, and detachment. Adjacent to Mercury, we then have Neptune, which corresponds to idyllic, embryonic oneness, tendencies of fantasy, escapism, spiritual ecstasy. Looking then to the solar archetype, we can see an affinity between the solar will, which strives towards the realization of higher ideals, and the Martian archetype, the archetype of action, agency, conflict and transformation, headstrong assertiveness, and self-determination. Adjacent to Mars, we then have the Plutonic archetype, representing the sense of separation itself and the various forms of primal anxiety, paranoia, rage, and sexual eros, which emerge from that sense of separation, which divides the human self from the world it inhabits. Jupiter is, of course, the archetypal father and represents the success, abundance, strength, and prestige of the archetypal king. Saturn then represents the inertia, momentum, or conservatism through which the past comes to perpetuate itself into the future, and thereby constrain the freedom of the present. Saturn and Jupiter together can thus be seen here to represent the demands and expectations of the world, which Shinji experiences as crushing burdens, and which are epitomized by Shinji's relationship with his father. The character Misato Katsuragi can then be seen to embody the Venusian archetype, the archetypal queen in polar contrast to the Jovian archetypal king. Unlike Shinji and his anima counterparts, Misato is a competent adult. She is the operations director of the nerve organization, and as such commands authority and respect. Misato represents the ideals of regal, feminine beauty, but simultaneously we also come to see that her personal life is noticeably disorganized, unkempt, and libertine, in stark contrast with the disciplinary professionalism of her outward persona. As such, we can see that Misato represents not only Venusian regality, but also the liberation of adulthood, the power to let go of the worries of the world and to have a control over one's own personal life, which Shinji and the other Eva pilots conspicuously lack. This lure of liberation thus corresponds to the archetype of Uranus, which we can see to be directly adjacent to Venus. Uranus resides in polar opposition to the disciplinary, institutional power structures represented by Saturn, the very structures of authority and control which Misato is required to navigate in her professional life. Misato's personal life thus represents a Uranian refusal of this Saturnian power, although this rebellion must be sequestered within the confines of a personal life which has been sharply divided from the professional world by the modern cultural dynamics of corporate and governmental bureaucracy. But this Uranian archetype is embodied even more fully within the monstrous angels. Uranus represents the celestial fires from beyond the firmament, the fires brought down by Prometheus, which allowed human civilization to break free from its primeval oneness with nature. Uranus is the archetype of combustion, rebellion, liberation, and the annihilation of solidified structures. It is the process whereby inner tensions, frictions, or contradictions attempt to resolve themselves through explosive transformation, and the breakdown of established normalcy, the violent ingression of a celestial, transcendental realm into the mundane world, which has come to embody an order which stands in deep contradiction to the order or logos of that transcendental realm. That then leaves us with two remaining archetypes, those of transcendental light and primordial darkness,